Something strange happens when people begin waking up mentally and emotionally. At first it doesn't feel like growth, it feels like confusion. The things that once excited you suddenly feel empty. Conversations that used to feel normal start sounding repetitive. Even your goals begin to feel questionable. And this is where most people misunderstand what spiritual awakening really is. They expect it to feel peaceful, clear, and inspiring from the beginning. But the truth is almost the opposite. Real awakening often starts with disruption. It starts with a feeling that something about the way everyone is living doesn't make sense anymore. And when that feeling begins, many people panic. They think something is wrong with them. They assume they are losing motivation, becoming distant, or overthinking life. But what if none of that is the problem? What if that uncomfortable shift is actually the beginning of something powerful? Because the truth about spiritual awakening is that it doesn't just change how you feel. It changes how you see everything. Success, relationships, ambition, identity, and even the meaning of progress itself. But there's one part of this process that almost nobody talks about. And missing this one truth is the reason many people quit the journey before the real transformation begins. What most people think awakening will give them is clarity. What it actually gives them first is awareness. And awareness changes everything in ways people don't expect. Because once you start seeing certain patterns in life, you can never unsee them again. And that realization is where the real shift begins. But the first change awakening creates is so subtle that most people miss it entirely. One of the earliest signs of spiritual awakening is not gaining answers, it's losing interest in things that once felt important. Suddenly, the endless chase for approval, validation, and recognition starts to feel strangely exhausting. You notice how much energy people spend trying to impress each other, competing over small things, or constantly proving something about themselves. And the strange part is that you used to participate in the same patterns without questioning them. But now when you watch these dynamics unfold, it feels almost like observing a movie you've already seen too many times. At first, this shift feels isolating. You may start wondering if you are becoming too serious or too detached. But what's really happening is that your awareness is expanding beyond surface-level rewards. You begin noticing that many of the things society labels as success are actually distractions that keep people running in circles. Status symbols, endless comparison, social competition. Once you start seeing the pattern, it becomes difficult to take it seriously anymore. And this is where many people feel tempted to go back to their old mindset, because staying aware requires a level of honesty that most environments don't encourage. But something even more surprising begins happening next. Once the illusion of constant competition fades, you start noticing something about human behavior that most people overlook entirely. And once you see it, your perspective on relationships will never be the same again. Because awakening quietly changes how you interpret people's actions. You begin noticing that many reactions around you have very little to do with you. Someone's criticism, someone's jealousy, someone's coldness. Often these responses come from their own internal struggles, not from anything you actually did. Before awakening, it's easy to take everything personally. But as awareness grows, you start seeing emotional patterns the way a strategist studies a game board. You notice insecurity hiding behind arrogance. You notice fear hiding behind aggression. You notice comparison hiding behind competition. And once you recognize these patterns, something interesting happens. Instead of reacting emotionally to every situation, you start responding with calm observation. Situations that used to trigger frustration begin to feel predictable. Conflicts that once drained your energy become easier to navigate. It's almost like stepping back and watching the mechanics of human behavior operate in real time. But here's the part most people don't realize yet. When your awareness grows like this, your environment begins to react to the change. And not everyone responds positively. Because when someone stops playing the usual social games, it quietly disrupts the expectations of the people around them. Some people respect the shift, others become uncomfortable. And that reaction reveals something important about the awakening process that many people are completely unprepared for. As awareness expands, your tolerance for superficial environments begins to shrink. Conversations that revolve around gossip, constant complaining, or shallow competition start feeling mentally draining. Not because you believe you are better than anyone, but because your mind is now wired to search for depth, meaning, and genuine connection. And when depth becomes your standard, certain environments naturally fall away. This is the phase where many people believe they are losing friendships or drifting away from groups they once belonged to. But what is actually happening is something much more precise. Your internal priorities are reorganizing themselves. Your attention is slowly moving away from noise and toward clarity. And attention, whether people realize it or not, is the most powerful resource a human being has. Where attention goes, energy follows. Where energy goes, life direction begins to form. And once your awareness becomes intentional about where attention flows, something powerful begins to change in how you move through life. You stop reacting automatically to every distraction. You start noticing what genuinely strengthens your focus and what slowly drains it. And this single skill, learning to direct your attention with awareness, is one of the hidden abilities that spiritual awakening quietly develops over time. But the next shift is even more surprising, because once your focus becomes more intentional, you begin noticing something unusual about time itself. Before awakening, life often feels rushed. People move from one goal to the next, constantly feeling behind, constantly chasing the next milestone. But as awareness grows, you begin noticing how much of that urgency is actually self-created pressure. Many people rush through life without ever asking whether the direction they are running toward actually matters to them. Awakening interrupts that pattern. You start questioning automatic goals. You begin asking deeper questions about purpose, direction, and fulfillment. And while that questioning may look like uncertainty from the outside, internally, it is the beginning of clarity. Because real clarity doesn't come from copying the paths everyone else is following. It comes from stepping back long enough to see the bigger picture. But this stage creates a challenge most people underestimate. Once you stop blindly following external expectations, you are responsible for choosing your own direction. And that level of responsibility can feel both freeing and intimidating at the same time. However, something remarkable begins to happen when people stay in this stage long enough. Instead of chasing random achievements, they begin designing their lives with intention. Small decisions become more thoughtful. Time becomes more valuable. Energy becomes more protected. And gradually, a completely different type of confidence starts developing. Not the loud, attention-seeking confidence people display on social media, but a quiet confidence built on self-awareness and clarity. This confidence doesn't need constant validation. It grows from understanding your own patterns, your own strengths, and your own direction. And when that type of confidence begins forming, something unexpected happens to the way others perceive you. Without trying to impress anyone, you start standing out naturally. People notice the calmness in how you respond to situations. They notice the clarity in your thinking. They notice that you don't get pulled into every drama or distraction around you. And that difference often sparks curiosity in others. But here's the twist most people don't see coming. The real purpose of awakening was never to separate you from others. It was to help you see life more clearly so you could engage with it more intentionally. Because once awareness stabilizes, you begin noticing opportunities that were invisible before. Opportunities to guide conversations toward meaningful topics. Opportunities to help people see new perspectives. Opportunities to contribute value in ways that go beyond surface-level interaction. Awakening doesn't remove you from the world. It refines how you participate in it. And when people reach this stage, the confusion that started the journey finally begins to make sense. Because all those uncomfortable early phases, the questioning, the detachment, the shifting priorities, were not signs of losing direction. They were signs of gaining clarity. But there is still one final truth about spiritual awakening that most people miss completely. The truth is that spiritual awakening is not a single moment. It's a gradual shift in how you experience reality itself. It begins with disruption, moves through awareness, and eventually leads to intentional living. The confusion people feel in the beginning is simply the mind adjusting to a broader perspective. And the distance people sometimes experience from old habits or environments is often the space needed for new clarity to form. The real transformation is not about becoming someone completely different. It's about becoming more conscious of how you think, where you place your attention, and what truly deserves your energy. And once that awareness becomes part of your everyday life, everything starts changing in quiet but powerful ways. Decisions become sharper, distractions lose their grip, your sense of direction becomes stronger. And most importantly, you stop living life on autopilot. Instead of reacting to everything around you, you begin shaping your path with intention. That is the part of awakening most people miss. It was never about escaping reality. It was about finally seeing it clearly enough to move through it with focus, purpose, and awareness. And once someone experiences that shift, something remarkable happens. Life no longer feels like a race to keep up with everyone else. It begins to feel like a journey that is finally your own.